the general concept of
and actually probably most of the time is spent on that, which is, okay then, if you want to understand why science has its current perspective, which is that we are a socially monogamous arrangement where the individuals have motivation to cheat on each other, but we have mate guarding, so my partner can't cheat, but if I can get away with it, I will, from both sexes. The reason science has that is because the human sexuality is understood and explored in terms of the entire evolutionary context. So we actually understand, survival of the fittest in action. And the reality is, and this is what it comes down to, Sex at Dawn portrays it like, it's as if the authors think that we would be happy if things were this way, therefore that's the way it is, that's the way it should be. Completely missing the point that evolution has zero interest in our happiness.
Yeah, exactly.
Wow.
it
Evolution
does.
has zero interest in
I
happiness.
don't know though.
It gives us happiness to manipulate us to the ends of reproduction.
But I think that now our own pleasure is actually an aspect of life that needs to be satisfied for us to
that might be
want to live.
That might be
as in
what
we
we're
need
working
to find
towards.
things pleasurable. Otherwise, that gives us reason to live. It's like a survival mechanism now.
Yeah, arguably, but it can give us that without it being a reason for our existence. And so this is what it comes down to, is that. So, for example, think of things like salmon. They will swim upstream.
Salmon.
Salmon.
I think it's
and they
semen.
Yeah,
Salmon.
Salmon. Say it. Salmon.
They swim upstream to spawn, and then
they swim upstream.
Yep.
They spawn. They throw eggs and sperm everywhere, and what happens? They die.
Yeah, they die. Yeah.
Praying mantis bites the head off the male, kills it.
Yeah.
So, what is your incentive to have sex as a praying mantis? It's the last thing you'll ever do. So, when you look at evolution and you look at reproduction from the evolution perspective, if you can successfully reproduce, job done. Good work.
Yeah.
Bugger off.
Right.
So when you come from that sort of a background, and the amount of suffering and harm that's caused in the process of reproduction, the idea that humans are suddenly the first species ever where, you can have sex because it feels good. That's all you need to worry about. Forget about the consequences.
That's not the general gist though of the Sex at Dawn argument that or just
No, the Sex
we
at
get to enjoy sex, la-di-da.
Yeah, the Sex at Dawn argument is more along the lines of we was arguing that humans in prehistoric environments use sex as like a social lubricant. We all have sex because it makes us get on better. And we share things better because we're having sex with each other. And also because we don't know whose baby that is, therefore we all take responsibility for it. It's a very appealing idea. Unfortunately, the evidence presented in Sex at Dusk was more along the lines of the second a mother wasn't certain who the father was, no one took responsibility for it because no one wanted to give away the limited resources that tribes have, because there's limitations on food, how much hunting can be done, and energy expenditure. So there's limitations on food, and if the whole tribe doesn't know whose kid it is, then no individual invests the time and energy into raising it other than the mother. And the mother's not a hunter, she's a mother.
Yeah.
So she's got very limited food. Typically, the easiest answer then is to kill the child because you can't support it.
Well, that's okay, cool. That's an interesting way. What makes me think about is that why are we constantly looking at how humans were back then? It's like back then humans were that's how we should be, and that's our natural state, and that's what we should be looking at in terms of defining who we are now and why we behave the way we do now. Like, why don't we just look at how we are now for the reasons because we're in the environment we're in now, and look at it in a fresh way instead of having to define ourselves by how we used to be.
No, that's true.
And limiting ourselves as well.
I don't think we always do. I think we do look at ourselves now and try and choose our choice.
No,
that
but
happens.
we do though. Every time you have an argument about human nature, psychology,
but that's because when we're having an argument about human nature, you've got to look at human nature. Human nature now is not our nature; it's our program.
But why can't we be looking at how we are now because of what we're in now? Why does it have to date
this is
so
it. This
far
is it.
back? It's like that matters more than what we've got now.
Because back then we don't have the influences that we have now. So right now we've got history. We've got our current upbringing, which is passed down by our parents, which is passed down by their parents, and so forth. So we've got all these intermediate factors which are on top of culture, which is on top of our genetic predispositions. So the idea is, if we go back a million years ago or 100,000 years ago, and we get like an idea of what we may have been like back then that's like the raw humanity.
I get that. I know. But I'm just what I'm saying.
So but that's if we want to find out nature.
I'm not saying I like thinking about that stuff sometimes, but sometimes I just think like, fuck that. Stop thinking about how we used to be. Let's just give ourselves a fresh start. Look at how we are now, and let ourselves be how we want to be now, and we can shed how we're supposed to have been, or the root things about nature. We don't have to be like that anymore. We don't have to have the survival aspect of ourselves anymore, because nowadays we have so much we have the ability to not have to fight for our survival. So let's try and ignore the fact that human nature makes us compete and survive. Like, that doesn't have to be the case anymore.
That's the flaw. Let's ignore the fact that human nature tries to make us...
Why?
Because if our genes give us this urge to punch each other in the face all the time, if we just ignore it, then we'll keep wondering. Look at the Catholic Church. Look at the Catholic Church.
Okay, that's fucked
Let's just
up.
pretend we don't want to have sex. If we just tell each other we don't want to have sex, everything will be fine.
No,
we know.
Why are you touching that small boy?
I get it. I agree with you completely. But I think that there are better ways.
Sex with God.
No, there are better ways to
Pedophile.
embrace everything about yourself. All urges, all past histories, all...
But we need to know what they are.
But you embrace them, fine. That's what we have these stupid fucking conversations about human nature, and we go, okay, cool. We may have aspects of that in ourselves, and if we want to try and be the best people we can be, given the environment we live in now, not back then, let's try and modify how we are that makes more sense these days.
We need to know what we are.
Let's go and... that's why that's why we had these discussions.
So we
go and play a lot of sport. Let's just go and play shitloads of sport. That's how we can release our competitive stuff.
No. So how do you solve a problem? You got to look at the source of the problem and how you can fix it. You got to go back to the start and fix it from the start. You know, it's gotten so fucking complicated and everything's gotten so massive that you always got to go back and go, well, this is actually how it all started and everything was working all right then for this and that reason or whatever. So got to look at it from those aspects. But you're definitely right. Like the way that we used to be is definitely, well, it's sort of like you see all these, every graph that you see that is climate change or whatever, it's all in this fucking hockey stick. It's just like straight up the roof, and then eventually we're going to have to go flatten them all out at least, or come back down, and that means that we've got to go back to a sustainable way of living, the way it used to be, in nearly every aspect.
So we have to change our mind to ways that are more relevant to today's issues.
Yeah. Like, I mean, you see like the ape turn into the man, and they're like, that picture you see how it's like the ape man, the evolutionary leap of the Neanderthal and all that, and then you see like an atomic bomb that gets released, and then back to Stone Age again. You know what I mean? So eventually you're going to have to go back to a sustainable, normal society.
Yeah, but that doesn't have to go back to the way we used to be. Why can't, like, how...
There's always going to be a problem then. There's always going to be a problem.
I don't think so. Why can't we just change and adapt? We don't have to just be a constant growing thing from the original core. Like, for example, why do we have to do that? Like, with wisdom teeth, right? We used to have wisdom teeth. Now they're evolving out of us, aren't they?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, cool, because we don't need them anymore. Just like the survival instinct may evolve out of us eventually because we don't need it anymore. If we start providing for each other more...
For us, our cultures are moving... and information technology.
I don't know, faster, whatever.
For evolution. Great. Yeah, we were designed out of ourselves before it evolved.
But it doesn't mean that we can't make conscious effort that precedes evolution to actually make it evolve quicker and go, you know what,
conscious decisions will not change evolution.
Okay, fine. It's psychology though. You have with psychological things like survival instincts, we can make a choice that we choose to shed that aspect of ourselves that's not useful anymore.
Well, are we talking about relationships or like environmental issues? What are we talking about? Everything.
Just the way, sure, like, I don't know, the way that your human brain functions in a very primitive way. It's primitive desires, it's primitive needs, it's instinctual behaviour.
Well, the fact that we've got all this technology now, but we've still got a primitive mindset.
Yeah.
We've got all the technology. We can feed, clothes, house everyone freely in the world, and we don't need to kill each other, fight each other for anything anymore, but we still want to do it because we've got that ingrained in us. Yeah, that's right. We don't need to.
That's what I mean. So we can choose to not use that, or at least like try and
And we
change, not just suppress it.
I feel like you're railing against something that no one's disagreeing with.
No, we're there. We're there.
Absolutely. And this is up to all of us. We don't need to know our nature to decide what it is we want to choose to do.
Yeah.
The advantage of knowing our nature is to understand why we struggle to do it.
Well, no, understanding ourselves, it makes it, that's, I think, really the only pure way to move on.
Yeah.
Really. I agree. So great. Conversations like these are great. But what I sort of meant to say then is that it's not that relevant in terms of what we choose to do now. Okay,
but
so
it's completely relevant.
But
it's completely relevant.
It's like we just keep talking
because
about
the fact is if we were a species that's evolved from praying mantis, and every time we had sex we'd eat half the body of the other.
Okay.
Choosing to no longer do that may be really hard.
Okay, I'll try again to number 3. By talking about this so much, it almost makes it like we're limiting ourselves to that, and it's like it's a limitation.
Sure, but if you want to build again, if you want to see what happened in the past and then build on something new again, it's sort of like, well, we've forgotten what's happened in the past. You know what I mean? So we can't move any further.
We embrace it, learn from it, embrace it, and then we choose to move
another
on. We
angle
learn from our mistakes and we move on.
But,
you know?
And it sounds great in theory, but to put it in a more concrete one, choosing to be able to fly doesn't make it so. Because we didn't evolve wings in our past, we are not flying creatures.
No,
and so, ignoring our past evolution and going, we should just decide to be able to fly won't change it. And that's an extreme example, but our brains have evolved. And our brains control how we think and how we feel. And so choosing to ignore them, granted, they're much more malleable than our ability to fly, but...
I really don't mean ignore. I really just think accept, understand, and then just...
And
find a way to make it move on.
And that's what we do. That is what we do. But the reason you see some people failing is because they're natural. They're people. And they're fucked.
Yeah.
People are flawed.
Well, they're just a complete another product of their environment, and unfortunately our environment is one of...
And we push all these ideals on each other. You should be a great person and giving, forgiving, and helpful, and all these things. And you're like, you know what? I agree with that. You should be a great person and forgiving and helpful and all these things. And we do try and live to it, and then we all fail, and then we judge each other for it, and we fail at forgiving each other for it, and it's this constant thing. And this is where, ultimately, the biggest problem in societies is not that people fail these things, it's that we fail to realise that everyone else fails them. Because we're all flawed, because we evolved.
So we fail to realise that it's just our nature to actually not be perfect.
Yeah, and that's where the forgiveness sort of thing really comes into it. Because things like the Middle East is the ultimate... You've hurt me, so I'm going to hurt you back. And it's never going to stop until who knows what. But
that's the sort of
human
change
nature
that needs to happen. It's like,
but is human nature do you think? I think I know, but do you think is human nature more so a genetic disposition, or do you think it is more so a product of your environment? I'm not talking about disease, I'm talking about action, reaction, that sort of shit. You know, do you think it's more like, okay, you've got a certain mother and father, you're born...
Personality.
You go and you go and run an army or something, and you're going to drop those bombs more so than someone else. Or the way that you were brought up and all these interactions you've had in your life leads you to the point of you wanting to do that.
So someone's human nature.
Someone's personality.
So an individual's personality is absolutely the consequence of nurture acting on our nature.
So environment.
No.
Both. It's both. Like, human nature is a genetic thing. An individual's personality is the consequence of human nature meeting reality. So the environment acting on our nature. Because our genetics programs a malleable brain, and the brain takes in inputs and puts out actions. So a personality it's absolutely a consequence of the environment, but that environment is meaningless without our genes telling it
how to react to that.
How to react.
Yeah.
So
have we got like a 50-50 scale here? Are they slightly outweighed? Like, because that's what I'm asking.
It's sort of the different things. Yeah. There's not like a balance between them. It's because our I guess,
like, for instance, if you get abused when you're younger, you're going to turn out fucking whack. If you have a privileged childhood, you're going to turn out maybe still out of whack, but you're going to turn out more socially acceptable out of whack because you're going to have a lot of money behind it and all the rest of it.
Yeah, but it's too complex to weigh it.
Yeah.
Because there's certain things. Okay, one example is there can be a simple gene or